Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 3 college football predictions. So last week I had a record of 19-3, and obviously that's my record on the season, as last week was Week 1. But getting into the games we have this week, beginning with Michigan hosting Texas. So this is an interesting game. You could look at this game and think Texas will win, but it's actually a more interesting matchup, as Michigan didn't look too great last week, beating Fresno State 30-10, and they still don't really have a starting quarterback, as Davis Warren and Alex Orji are both not that good. Now, the Michigan run game also was surprisingly not as good as expected last week, and if their run game isn't effective once again, this could be a really tough game for Michigan, especially facing a good Texas defense. Then on the other side is where things get really interesting, as the Texas offense is great. They put up 52 points last week in the season opener against Colorado State, but they face a great Michigan defense that's one of the best in the country. But Michigan's defense is going to need to play well and hold Texas to a low point total if they want to win, because Michigan can only win this game in the defensive battle. They don't have the offense to keep up with Texas, but this is a tough game. I'm going to take Texas to get the win. I think at some point the Michigan defense will get worn down. Texas will start to find offensive success, and I have them coming out on top with a rather convincing 26-10 win. Next game we have Penn State hosting Bowling Green. So Penn State beat West Virginia last week, and their offense looked pretty good. Now, they face a Bowling Green team who won last week, but it was against Fordham, who's an FCS team. But Penn State is the much better team here. It'll show as they'll dominate their home opener and win by a score of 45-3. Moving on, we have Arkansas at Oklahoma State. So this is an interesting matchup, as this is the first meeting between these two teams since 1980, and both teams are coming off a Week 1 victory over an FCS team, and they're getting their first real test of the season this week. Now, Arkansas was great stopping the run last week, allowing just 7 rushing yards, which was the second fewest among any team. But Oklahoma State is a team, they want to run the football with running back Ollie Gordon, who's arguably the best back in the country, and I think they'll find success running the football, as Gordon led the country in rushing yards last season, ran for 126 yards and 3 scores last week, and it is very hard to slow him down and slow down this Oklahoma State offense. Now, the Arkansas offense did score 70 points last week, and I don't think the Oklahoma State defense is anything amazing, so I could see Arkansas having offensive success as well, and this game could turn into a shootout. I think this will be on the higher scoring side, but I've got Oklahoma State getting the win. I believe their offense is better, they're the better overall team, and I've got Oklahoma State 37-28. Next game, we have Tulane hosting Kansas State. So this game is similar to other games this week in the fact that both teams are coming off games where they easily beat an FCS team, as Kansas State beat UT Martin and Tulane beat Southeast Louisiana. Now, I think this game will come down to each team's ability to run the football, as last week both teams ran for well over 200 yards, as Tulane ran for 241 yards and Kansas State ran for 283. Now, the difference is the run defense for each team, as Kansas State did what you would expect, allowing just 36 rushing yards against an FCS team, whereas Tulane allowed over 100 rushing yards against an FCS team. So I think that's going to be the difference in this game. Kansas State is going to be able to run the football effectively, control this game with their run game, and I have them beating Tulane in a close one. But I could see Tulane with the upset win, because Tulane is a good team, and I could see the potential for an upset win similar to how we saw in 2022 between these two teams, where Tulane won 17-10, but I do have Kansas State winning 27-23. Up next, we have Georgia Tech at Syracuse. So Georgia Tech is now ranked in the top 25 after wins over Florida State and Georgia State to start the season, and they don't face a Syracuse team that is solid and beat Ohio last week. Now, Syracuse has a good passing offense with former Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord, who threw 4 touchdowns in the win last week. But Georgia Tech does have a solid pass defense, and this is another game where I think it's going to be decided by one team's ability to run the football, as Georgia Tech is averaging over 200 rushing yards a game, and Syracuse could not stop the run last week, allowing 255 yards. And I think that's what the difference in this game will be. Georgia Tech can run the football, and Syracuse won't be able to stop it. And I've got Georgia Tech winning in a close one, 27-21. Another game where I could see the upset, but I got Georgia Tech with the win in a close one. Moving on, we have Georgia hosting Tennessee Tech. This game is not going to be anywhere near close. Georgia's the best team in the country. They face Tennessee Tech, an FCS team that's pretty bad. They lost last week, and after their loss last week, Tennessee Tech is now 11-28 since 2020. But Georgia is going to dominate this game. They'll win big 55-0. Up next, we have Northern Illinois at Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is coming off a big road win over Texas A&M last week, and they need to avoid a letdown game. Now, the good news, they face Northern Illinois, who won last week against an FCS team, but overall isn't too good. Notre Dame is the much better team. They have one of the best defenses in the country. Their defense will dominate this game, even if it takes their offense a couple drives to get going. But eventually Notre Dame will dominate this game, and they will win by a score of 48-3. Up next, we have Utah hosting Baylor. So Utah quarterback Cam Rising returned last week, and he threw 5 touchdowns in their Week 1 win over Southern Utah. And Utah now faces a Baylor team where you really don't know what you're going to get. Baylor won last week against an FCS team, but they were pretty bad last year. Now, the Baylor offense is solid with Daquan Finn at quarterback, who's pretty good. But the Baylor offense faces a really good Utah defense, and Baylor probably won't be able to score many points. But Baylor needs a big win, and here's a chance for it to be a good Utah team, but I just don't see it happening. Utah's the much better team. Their defense will dominate this game. Their offense is good as well. Utah wins easily 31-10. Moving on, we have Iowa hosting Iowa State. So this is a game that's pretty tough to predict. Iowa's offense somehow put up over 40 points last week in their win over Illinois State. But now that they're back to playing FBS teams, they probably won't score much, especially against a pretty solid Iowa State defense. Now, Iowa State's offense was pretty bad last week, scoring just 21 points against North Dakota, who is an FCS team. And that is not a good sign for the Iowa State offense, as they now have to face a great Iowa defense. But this is going to be a low-scoring, boring game, as most Iowa games are. I could definitely see Iowa State with the upset win, but Iowa has won 7 of their last 8 meetings between these two teams, and Iowa State has never beaten a ranked Iowa team on the road. So I'm going to take Iowa to win this game just barely, 14-10. Moving on, we have Jacksonville State at Louisville. So Louisville was another new team to the top 25 after their 62-0 win over Austin Peay. But they now face a Jacksonville State team who was really bad defensively last week, allowing 55 points in their loss to Coastal Carolina. This is not a good matchup for Jacksonville State, considering they faced a Louisville offense that put up 62 last week. Louisville's going to score a lot again against a bad defense, and I've got them winning by a score of 48-13. Up next, we've got Middle Tennessee at Ole Miss. This is another game that probably won't be too close. Middle Tennessee barely beat Tennessee Tech, who's an FCS team, last week, as they won 32-25. And they now face Ole Miss, who won 76-0 last week. But the Ole Miss offense might not put up 76 points, but the offense will dominate again. Ole Miss is going to win in a blowout. I've got them 52-6. Next game, we got Florida A&M at Miami. And this is an FCS versus FBS matchup. Miami was great last week. Quarterback Cam Ward looked like an early Heisman contender. He's going to have a huge game, and Miami will destroy Florida A&M, winning 51-3. Moving on, we've got South Florida at Alabama. So when these teams met last season, Alabama won 17-3, but that was the game where Jalen Milroe didn't even play. But wow, what a difference a year makes. As Jalen Milroe is now one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and this time around it is not going to be anywhere near close for Alabama. I've got them destroying USF and winning by a score of 52-7. Next game, we got Buffalo at Missouri. Missouri should win this game. They're clearly the better team. Their offense is going to score a lot of points. I don't have a ton to say about this game. Missouri wins easily 43-10. Next game, we've got Kansas at Illinois. So both teams won easily last week, beating FCS teams. And both teams actually played each other last season, early in the year, where Kansas won by a score of 34-23. But that game in Lawrence, Illinois is now home for this game. But this game is interesting. Both teams are, I think, better than they were last year, so that makes it pretty tough to predict. For Kansas, quarterback Jalen Daniels is healthy, and he was solid in the opener, but it was the Kansas run game that really stood out, as they dominated for 331 rushing yards, which was the 6th most rushing yards by any FBS team last week. Now, the Illinois defense is pretty good against the run, and that makes a tough matchup. But I am going to take Kansas to get the win, as even if they don't find a ton of success running the football, quarterback Jalen Daniels is a difference maker, plus he's got a great receiver in Luke Grimm, who had over 100 receiving yards last week. But Kansas has the better offense. I think they're the better overall team. Kansas wins 31-20. Next game, we have Tennessee against NC State, that game in Charlotte. So this game is a game that could be pretty close. Now, NC State did get the win last week, but they didn't play the greatest game, winning just 38-21 against Western Carolina, who's an FCS team. But the NC State offense was good, throwing for over 300 yards and rushing for another 200. But they now face a great Tennessee defense. Then on the flip side, Tennessee's offense was great with 69 points and over 700 yards of offense. And they face an NC State defense that wasn't great last week, but I don't expect last week's game to be a tone setter for how NC State is defensively. Because I do think they'll be a pretty good defense, even though they allowed 21 to an FCS team. But I am going to take Tennessee to get this win. I think they're the better overall team. They've got a great offense, good pass game, good run game, and their defense is the difference maker here. This game will be pretty entertaining, back and forth for a while, but Tennessee ends up winning 34-23. Next game, we've got Western Michigan at Ohio State. So Western Michigan faces a Big Ten team for the second straight week after they lost a close game to Wisconsin last week. But they now face Ohio State, who demolished Akron, winning 52-6. I don't think it'll be quite that one-sided, but Ohio State will win this game in a blowout. They're the much better team and will dominate, winning 48-10. Moving on, we've got LSU hosting Nicholls. So LSU is coming off a Week 1 loss to USC last week, and that is their third straight season-opening loss. The good news, LSU plays Nicholls State, which is an FCS team. LSU is going to dominate this game, get back on track, and win by a score of 56-0. Moving on, we've got Houston at Oklahoma. This is another game that probably won't be too close. Houston's in the middle of rebuilding their team, and they don't have to face an Oklahoma team that dominated Temple last week, winning 51-3. Obviously, the offense was great, putting up 51 points, and the defense forced 6 turnovers. Now, while I don't think Oklahoma will hit quite those numbers this week, it will still be a dominant Oklahoma victory. They are much better than Houston, and they will win 45-6. Up next, we have App State at Clemson. So Clemson really needs this game because they were terrible last week in their 34-3 loss to Georgia. Now, Clemson's offense needs to show they can actually score after a brutal showing last week. But App State is a pretty solid Group of 5 team, and they always seem to play these big schools tough. As in the past few years, they took North Carolina to double overtime last year. They lost to North Carolina by 2 points in 2022. In 2022, they also beat Texas A&M. And in 2021, they played a very close game against Miami. So, App State's got a track record of playing these big-name schools tough. I think they'll do it again. I do think Clemson gets the win and has a better offensive game. But this is another game that's pretty close. But I do have Clemson with the win, 28-25. Next game, we have Boise State at Oregon. So Oregon is a very interesting team at the moment, as on paper, they're one of the best teams in the country, but their play definitely did not show it last week, as they won by only 10 points against Idaho, who's an FCS team. They don't have to face Boise State, who's one of the best Group of 5 teams, and they have potential to be the Group of 5 team to make the college football playoff. So this could actually be a really close game for Oregon. The Boise State offense was great last week with 56 points, and running back Ashton Jeandy was great with 20 carries for 267 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, he's not going to have that kind of performance against a good Oregon defense, but Oregon does need to be careful against a good Boise State offense. Now, the Oregon offense also needs to get going, scoring just 24 points last week against an FCS team, but they face a Boise State defense that allowed over 40 points last week, and I think Oregon's offense is going to get going, have a breakout game, finally get scoring a lot of points. I think this game will be a higher scoring game, but Oregon's offense is eventually too much for Boise State to handle. Oregon wins 47-24. Next game, we got Arizona hosting Northern Arizona. So this is an FCS versus FBS game. Arizona's offense put up 61 last week against New Mexico, and wide receiver Tedero McMillan was insane with 10 catches for 304 yards and 4 scores. I'm expecting another big game from him and the Arizona offense. Arizona will dominate this game, and I've got them winning 70-13. But something to keep an eye on is the Arizona defense, which allowed 39 points against a bad New Mexico team last week. But this game shouldn't be close. I've got Arizona winning big. As I said a second ago, 70-13. And our final game, it is USC hosting Utah State. So USC is coming off a big win over LSU, but they're now playing on a short week after they played on Sunday, and they're also need to avoid a potential letdown. But Utah State's team, they beat an FCS team last week. Nothing too impressive. USC's the much better team. I think they'll win this game pretty easily by a score of 45-17. But those are my Week 2 college football predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications so you don't miss any of their upcoming videos. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think will win some of this week's big games. But thank you for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.